Actually, I'm going to correct myself. Hello, Clifford. I'm going to correct myself because with this schematic call. Well, welcome back again to another video discussing the next stage in the wiring of the Hurricane Motorsports Roadsters Cobra replica. What I've been doing today is of course, if you look at the previous video, I routed all the wires and got them roughly where they belong. Today I've been starting to hook things up, get things a little bit closer, and I've also mounted my gauges in my dash, started cutting the holes for the switches, and did some other things. So let me show you what we've got going on. Okay, the first thing you'll notice is this right here. Several of these wires, these right here, a lot of these are not going to be necessary. This blue one is an oil pressure sending unit. I'm not going to need that because I'm using a manual oil pressure gauge. The pink one goes to an HEI distributor. That one is not needed. And of course the red one and the black one are hot and ground. These right here are going to the front of the vehicle. I'm going to have to basically just leave them roughly in place until I get the body back on, because I don't know exactly how long they need to be cut to go to the headlights and the parking lights and everything else. This right here, I've got it roughly routed. This goes to the negative side of the coil. That is your tack feed. This one right here is a plastic tube going to the aforementioned manual oil pressure gauge. This right here is the sending unit for the coolant. I've got it routed here. It will go under and go over to this connection right here. If you can see that brass connection, that is where it will sense the coolant temperature. I've also got again, this oil pressure line here goes down to the stock location for the oil pressure sensor. So that is in. Now I've also mounted my gauges. If I can get Clifford out of the way here. And Opie, hello. Yes, we have the shop dogs. Got the gauges mounted. They are in. What I've had to do is get a little bit creative. I did not put my heater in the stock location. That heater actually is going a little bit further to the left because I wanted to maintain a glove box. Now that has created other problems. Anytime you move stuff around in a car, it's going to create problems. So what we've done here is I've got the tachometer and speedometer mounted. Back here, you can't really tell because I've moved some things around again, but I've got everything roughly positioned as far as the feeds that go to the gauges. The oil pressure line, of course, is going to go to that oil pressure gauge. Fuel line has two lines from it. It has a sending unit connection and a power. The water temperature, of course, that wire is back there. Oil temperature, I'm not sure if I'm going to be using that one, because I'm not sure if this particular engine I'm putting in it has provisions for that. I'm going to have to do some research on that before I can let you know on that. Now the volts, you just run a 12-volt line into that and a ground, and that will read that automatically. The speedometer is not the one that came with the kit. You can see it's a little bit different, but what this one is this is a GPS speedometer. So it is going to read GPS signal as opposed to hook up to the transmission the way a traditional one did. Now, what did I do to make room for this? First of all, the way I've connected this, the gauges, is I've got them siliconed in. The silicone is still drying. I've already tested one. It's going to work just perfectly. I had to, believe it or not, trim back the plugs for the light, and to make room for the oil pressure unit, which I'm not sure if you can actually see that or not. It's to this gauge here. What I've done is I've put in a 1/2-inch spacer. The button head screws that I'm using are not long enough in this position, so I'm waiting on some new ones to come in. They will be in Thursday. But I got a series of these, which are 1/2-inch, 1/4-inch inside diameter, 1/2-inch deep spacers. And what I'm doing is I'm tilting the dash out just a little bit. Now you won't really be able to tell. It's a very subtle difference, and it gives me room, that extra little bit of tilt gives me room for that particular gauge. Now I've got the switches hooked up. One of these this is going to be the horn button. One of these is for the light switch, and another one is for the dimmer. I've got a switch for the heater, which is right here. That is mounted. It's a 3-way rotary switch. There is also a switch for the windshield wipers, but the problem with the switch is, let me show you. This fiberglass dash is very thick. It's about I want to say probably almost an 1/8 inch thick. Now the switch you use for the wipers is this Lucas switch right here, and you can tell it's not very deep at all. And I did quite a bit of drilling and quite a bit of locating trying to get that to work, and it's just not going to work with this dash because the dash is too thick. That is not going to defeat me, however, because with the ProFlow EFI, the electronic fuel injection, you have to use an Android tablet that monitors it in real time. And one of the things I've thought about doing all along is extending the dash down to the floor here, mounting myself a little panel where I can actually have that. And I think since that's going to be an aluminum panel that's very thin gauge, I'm simply going to put that switch for the wipers right there next to it. It'll look okay and it will work. The ignition switch goes here. I've already test fitted it. It's good. The light switch goes here. I've already test fitted that. That looks good. This right here is your high beam indicator. This right here, these cars only have one signal light. It's for both sides. Whenever you have the blinker on either side, this is the light that flashes. So I've got that positioned as well. And of course the glove box. The glove box that I'm going to use is this one right here. Still working on a way to mount that up, but I've got a couple of ideas on that. So be sure and stay tuned to that. Now, as far as inside here, this wiring right here, I've got it in this particular location simply because this goes to the ignition switch. So once I get the dash in permanently, once my screws come in on Thursday, that switch will go in and I will be able to run that. The light switch, I've already got it plugged in. It's right here. Hello, Clifford. I'm getting kissed by a dog as we speak, and he's sniffing my phone. This is the light switch. Of course, it will connect right here, so I've already got it wired into the system as well. Now, this right here is for your high and low beam indicator. The harness that comes with the kit already has this terminated into 2 wires. One right here is the hot lead, and then of course you've got that for a ground. That goes to one of those Lucas toggle switches, and of course this will be routed over there. So that is good too. These wires right here are not labeled. Chances are they're power and ignition and things like that. I will get that figured out. There's also a radio connection in here that I'm not going to be using as well. But here you can see this right here is for your instrument lights. This one feed is going to go to the white wire on all the instruments to light them and illuminate them. This one right here is the coolant temperature. That will go to the signal side of the water gauge right here. This here is power. This here is instrument ground. That is the ground for everything. This right here, this blue wire with the white stripe, is for your oil pressure. Again, this is the under dash version of the one that I showed you under the hood. This is not used. So that is not going to go anywhere. And somewhere down in there, of course, you've got the fuel line as well, which I've already located. I've just got to get it positioned. But basically what we're at now is we're at a holding pattern to wait for the actual longer screws to go in so I can mount with my spacers. And I'm also going to get ready with some other connections as well and get everything put back together permanently and then loom it all. Of course, all of this is going to be loomed as well. The feed for the alternator, this has a GM style 1-wire alternator. This is the wiring feeds for that. I've still got to hook that up. And of course, this right here is for it's got a VW style turn signal indicator that goes on the column. That will wire that in as well as some other assorted things. So we are getting a handle on it, just trying to eat this elephant one step at a time. Of course, my shop dogs keep me wonderful company. This one right here keeps trying to get into things. She's always been the one that hears ghosts and other things in walls and things, and I don't know what's going on. I think she senses the extraterrestrials or the spooks and ghosts and stuff that are in the room because she's all time getting into things and I have to keep an eye on her. Opie right here is a good boy. He just minds his own business. Okay, the next step up is I'm going to start looming the stuff under the hood. I'm going to make the connections under the hood to the sending units. I've already got the oil pressure, as you saw, hooked up. I've got to hook up the negative side terminal to the tack to the coil, and I've got to hook up my pressure, my coolant sensor up under the hood as well. And once I get those connections hooked up and get the wires finished routed there, I'm going to loom all of that and make it look nice and neat. And now on this side, I've got that connection heat shrunk, and it is hooked up and ready to go as well. So now we're to the point where I've got to hook up the alternator and the starter connection to the solenoid, which is that big purple wire right there that's going to lead to this side of the engine, and get that done. And just like that, we've got the purple wire run to the solenoid side of the solenoid, and then you see this blue wire which turns into a red wire going into the one-wire alternator. So those connections are done. I've got to do the master ground, and I've got a ground strap to hook up with, but the dogs have been more than patient. As you can see, they're kind of chilling out. I think I'm going to call it a day on this. What we've gotten done so far, of course, we've got the gauges mounted into the dash pan, which we're waiting for longer screws to mount the dash so I can put my spacers in. I've got everything routed to where all I've got to do is plug it in. The light switch and ignition switch are in position. I've got to hook up the ignition switch. That's not going to be a big deal. I've got the starter solenoid wire hooked up. I've got the alternator wire hooked up all to the battery cable. And of course, I've got these routed to the front. And again, I can't do really anything with those until I get the body on it, so I know exactly how short I need to cut the wires to get them to look nice and neat. That right there is the ignition cable. I may go ahead and try to attack that here in just a minute. Let me go ahead and do that, because that's not going to take that long. And here we are again. Wires cut to fit, terminals connected, heat shrink applied. It's following the very simple schematic that comes with the wiring kit for the car, and it is good to go. So that right there, the ignition switch is hooked up. It's ready to go into this position in the dash as soon as I get the spacers. So the ignition switch, the light switch, I'll figure it out in a second, are both hooked up. I've got to find a 3-position switch that is actually one of the toggles that's supposed to go here for the headlights, and once we get all of that done, we will be good to go. Actually, I'm going to correct myself. Hello, Clifford. I'm going to correct myself, because what this schematic calls for is the turn signal switch to be a 3-way toggle that goes on the dash, and then you have a dimmer switch. I've got the dimmer switch already hooked up. The cool thing is I don't have to worry about that, because again, this comes with a VW style turn signal switch, which I will put up momentarily. And again, this is all just singular mock-up because I've still got to get my screws over there. But there is your ignition key right there. It is in position. Seems to be fitting just fine. And what I've got here, there's the ignition keys. Ford style, teeth up. Looks like it's going to work. And with that, I think we're going to call it a day for this video. What I'm going to do next is get in there. Once I get my screws in for the spacers and everything, I'll go ahead and hook up all the gauges, all the leads to the gauges and everything, and the oil pressure, the manual oil pressure tube, and get all of that hooked up to where all that's good to go. Once that is done, I can go ahead and start mounting my glove box and mount the connections up to the heater. Be sure and stay tuned. More of this coming. We appreciate you coming. Hit like and subscribe if you like the content. I'd really appreciate hearing from you if you have any comments. Thanks. Bye.